again, welcome back to the show, guys. Sitting here with Dr. Peter Phelan and Dr. Edgar Feinberg. As we were talking about this CoreValve, let's spend some time, Dr. Feinberg, talking about where we've come from.
Well, aortic valvular disease traditionally been handled with open surgery, and what that involves is putting the patient to sleep,
right.
Cutting their chest open, making an incision from the top of the breastbone all the way through the sawing, all the way through the breastbone. Of course, we put a retractor in there, which many people describe. I've heard patients describe it as a come-along,
right?
Which is it's a large mechanical retractor,
right?
And then we hook the patient to a heart-lung machine and actually stop the heart. Once the heart is stopped, then we cut the heart open, and we can sew a new valve in. And then we close the heart up, we start the heart back again, and then we have to wean it from the heart-lung machine, have to wire all this back together. And patients are in the hospital for 4 to 7 days.
Yes, sir.
And it's substantially inconvenient, I would have to say.
Right.
Most people are out of their life for 6 to 8 weeks.
Right.
Now, it does work very well, and it gives patients a lot of good quality of life after that, and it clearly is the gold standard for the care of aortic valve disease that everything has to be measured against. But the important thing that this whole process is done for us is there are a large number of patients who we just can't do that surgery on,
right,
for a variety of other problems, ranging from osteoporosis to just having had heart surgeries before.
Right.
Sometimes you say you're not going to be able to handle all of the things your body's got to go through to put this new valve in, and so we don't do it on a lot of elderly, frail patients.
They're just not a good candidate to have that large procedure.
While they may survive the operation, their life's not better off. They may be worse off.
Right.
Right.
And so now we've got this procedure. So let's talk a little bit about the stent itself. And we've got a graph of it, of the stent. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about this and maybe how the procedure works.
So this is a interesting metal. This is called nitinol. And nitinol is an interesting metal. It's been used in peripheral stents for many years. And what's nice about this metal is that it basically has a shape to cold. So what we do is we actually put this into ice water, and we can crush this down to a very about the size of a pencil, a little bit bigger than a pencil.
Wow.
And then that is slid up through the artery, and then when we take this catheter apart, it pops out and looks like this. And the valve is actually sewn in. That's what it looks like in the valve itself. Basically, your native valve is pushed out of the way.
Okay.
And then this thing acts as this valve, and it sits in there very, very nicely.
Wow, very nice. And then now we have a little video that we can kind of show the route and how that happens.
So like all the procedures, that we go transfemoral, we're going to go into the common femoral artery, and this shows a small incision. Typically, we'll make a small incision by Dr. Feinberg to get down to the artery.
Right.
We then pass this catheter up. Typically, what we'll do is we'll do a balloon there first to give us a little headroom to put the valve in, and then we'll put the valve in. This whole procedure that takes about 20 seconds on this video takes us close to about an hour to do in realistic time.
Right.
But that's it. That is really it. The valve is basically in place and functioning relatively quickly. And what's nice about that is that we do have the opportunity to kind of move it a little bit before we get to that point, not dramatically. But then once we pull that valve out, we'll take a couple of pictures, make sure that we're okay, repeat the hemodynamics, and there's a fairly pronounced improvement right up front. We'll see that the cardiac anesthesiologist, as part of our team, will get us some cardiac outputs, which is the function of the heart, and really vast majority of them show a dramatic improvement right then and there on the table.
And so just from a timing standpoint of how long somebody is under, we're talking about for a CABG, we're talking about for a long period of time.
Right. The stress on the patient is much, much less. So it's available to more patients. That's the point.
Right. And not that the cost matters, but the cost of this has got to be so much more cheaper than or maybe not.
No.
Maybe not.
It's not.
Okay.
No, it's actually it's comparable. And what the device itself, so the valve that Dr. Feinberg puts in is about 1/10 of the price of the valve that we put in, the new CoreValve. And part of that has to do with the research and a lot of other things that happen with the way the things are going. But it is not cheaper, and so if anything, it might actually be more expensive at the end of the day. But it is offering, cost, barring cost, it really offers the patients that years ago that we've had in our practice that we did not have an alternative. We just said, I'm sorry, unfortunately, this is your life until it ends, and it's going to be miserable, and there's nothing we can do about it. You're too sick for the conventional surgery, and this is an opportunity to offer them at least a quality of life.
And so one thing that we can't really value is efficacy and how efficient this is, and the studies really show that, that it's really making a difference. And so what are some of these trials' results? What were the conclusions for those?
Things. So the trial is broken up into 3 different cohorts, and the very first cohort was what Dr. Feinberg would call a prohibitive risk. Somebody he would absolutely not take to surgery. He was just way too sick, had maybe radiation or previous bypass surgeries or several bypass surgeries, or a very calcified aorta where he couldn't put his clamps on there, and just said, I'm not taking you to surgery. And when you looked at that group compared to a norm, it did much better. Okay. Then there's another group that Dr. Feinberg would call high risk. And those are people that he would take to the operating room. But he said, if I had to take 10 patients and go from the lowest risk to the highest risk, he'd take number 8, 9, and 10 as the highest risk. We would separate those into a cohort. So there were 750 patients. Half of them went to surgery, and half of them went to CoreValve. And what there was is really an improvement in survival at the end of 1 year in the CoreValve group, which was really the first time that had been shown. There was a previous valve, it's a balloon expandable valve that had just been reported about 2 years earlier that showed there was no difference. This is the first time it's actually showed a difference of about 20 to 15% decreased mortality.
Of that high-risk group?
Of that high-risk group.
Yes, sir.
Right now, we're looking at the moderate risk group, so we're dropping the eyeball test.
Okay. Wow. And the rate of stroke?
Comparable.
Wow.
Which is encouraging. One of the things that, the surgeon, and this is one of the things when the first trial came out looking at the balloon expandable, the stroke rate was actually higher in the stent valve cohort as opposed to surgery. And that basically said, the surgeons have been doing this for many, many years and have done a very, very good job in what causes stroke, how to avoid strokes, and have done a good job. And it also said that cardiologists, as part of this heart team, needed to do a better job. And I think as part of the CoreValve, we were able to take what the previous stent did, look at their mistakes, and try to capitalize that on, if you will. And therefore, at the end of this trial, the stroke rate was comparable in both cohorts.
And this is the first time a prospective randomized study has shown that a transcatheter aortic valve to be superior to surgery. Correct. And that's amazing.
No, it's really a wonderful thing for patients. I mean, I'm a surgeon, so in many ways it's competing with the tradition, but you can't hold tradition for the sake of people's health, and so my practice changes, and I become more involved in cath lab types things because that seems to be better for my patients. And so rather than trying to hold on to tradition, because in medicine, when people hold on to tradition, they usually hold on to mistakes, and move forward with helping to get this kind of program started. So I'm very excited about it, and I think it's a great thing for patients. And I see this kind of technology probably growing very rapidly. And we talked earlier about cost. And if you look at it, you're right. It's in a sense that you're intuitively that it should be cheaper. There's a lot of things that go into play here. One is that the companies have to recoup their R&D cost in a limited amount of time, because what's going to happen is with this kind of study results out, now everybody else is going to try to build something, go in the business, and compete. Sure. And so in 5 to 12 years, this will be cheaper than open surgery.
Much like any major advancement, like you're talking about.
Well, just like, your first IBM PC was about $5,000, and that same amount of computing you can get in a $40 flip phone now.
Exactly. So all of those things have to be taken into account with that. Very nice. And so was there also a significant change in quality of life?
Well, interesting, and this was an interesting tidbit. And one of the things about that is that they looked at patients at 1 month, at the CoreValve versus surgery, which is really kind of unfair.
It's a little early.
Kind of unfair, exactly. And so when you say, well, how do you feel at the end of 1 month surgery? I feel, well, kind of cruddy, you know. But if you look at them at 1 year, they're about comparable. And so there's some improvement. And I think the quality of life overall, both cohorts got better. And that's really what you wanted to see. I think it's unfair to evaluate surgery 1 month after surgery versus a transfemoral stick versus an open heart, and then say, well, how do you feel? And then say, well, I feel horrible after my first surgery after the first month. But at 1 year, the quality of life is better on both cohorts, and that was really important.
Well, and you know, as the social worker who's been involved in a lot of these people with cardiovascular surgeries and on the CABG team, I can tell you just the difference in pain in the chest is a big difference.
Sure.
Just the pain that they have just in their ability to ambulate and how quickly. All of those things are not really able to be measured, so a lot of those things. We're going to take our last short break, and when we come back, we'll wrap up this segment about this amazing technology. So we'll be right back after this next short break.